Welcome back to 1% Weekly. This week we look at the trouble on the high street and restaurant land. Aidan Miller talks about the future of art investing and its final warning time for overseas taxpayers. This is not a good time to be in the business of owning and operating middle-tier restaurants on Britain's high street. Recently, Coat, who do very nice brasseries, I've been there many times myself, announced losses of £93 million. Jamie Oliver, arguably perhaps the best-known chef in the country, was within hours of bankruptcy with his chain Jamie's Italian, and he had to put £13 million of his own money in to save it. Time will tell whether that was a shrewd investment or whether he should just have dug a hole in the back garden and buried the cash. Why is all this happening? Well, it's several different factors coming together to cause a perfect storm. First, you've got the fact that there are an awful lot of these kind of restaurants. I think that, there really are too many for the country. They've saturated the market. You walk down most high streets these days, you'll just see one after another after another. Second issue is, of course, business rates have just been hiked massively. So one of their core overheads has just gone up massively. Third, the national living wage has increased, and restaurants are one of those trades that have always relied on the lower end of the labour market to make their business model work. So when the costs of kitchen staff and waiters and so on goes up, again, their margins shrink. And because of all the competition from the other restaurants, they can't raise prices. If anything, it's discounting that's prevailing because they're trying to compete. So they're becoming busy fools where they're running round and round in circles, offering bigger and bigger discounts and actually ending up making bigger and bigger losses. So it's a totally unsustainable model. Meanwhile, the fine dining end of the market is okay because the people with higher incomes are still going out to eat as often as they did before. The problem for the mid-tier restaurants is that the average family is under a lot of financial pressure. In fact, for the first time since 1988, last year, British households borrowed more than they made, to the tune of an average £900 per household. So in other words, they've gone deeper into debt just to stand still with their lifestyle. And of course, one of the easiest things to cut back on would be those treats where you go and eat out for whatever you want to celebrate that particular week. So what we're seeing now is more of the eating at home. So companies like Just Eat are doing really well with home deliveries, but the people that actually would previously have gone out to eat are staying indoors. And that means the mid-market restaurants are really struggling. So from your point of view as an investor, obviously, you've got to be careful now about some of these listed restaurant chains on the stock market because most of them are going to be under a lot of financial pressure. And from your point of view as a business owner, clearly I think this reinforces a model that I've often said to people myself in the mastermind groups and so on that we've occasionally run. You need to be at the top end of the market. There's no money in the middle. If you look at what's happened to the middle classes across the developed world in the last 3 or 4 decades, their incomes have remained static or declined, whereas they rose massively in the decades up to the 1970s as everyone's living standards grew after the war. Since then, the majority of middle class, middle income people have actually been stagnant. The only real increase in their wealth, or should I say apparent increase in their wealth, is the way their properties have gone up in value, but that's more or less being tied to the way the currency has gone down in value. So if you value your home in things like ounces of gold, you'll get a very different impression to the fiat currency that's lost, 90% plus of its purchasing power in the last 40 years. So we've got a real dilemma on the high street here. Households are being squeezed. Spending in the middle income groups is going to have to go down because they're deeper and deeper in debt and it's not sustainable. So whatever you're looking at investments, try to avoid companies that are focused on that middle market and try to look for companies that have got a nice, safe, secure, sustainable model serving people at the higher end. For our final chat with art investment expert Aidan Mellor, I wanted to pick his brains about where things are going in the future. So Aidan, for our final discussion, I think we need to kind of look forward into the future of art investing. I'd like to do that in two ways. One is to sort of look at the trends going forward for these famous historical artists that we've already touched on, and the other is where you see contemporary arts in all this. So yeah, okay. So let's start with what you see as the major trends going forward for historical art.
So trends are a huge area, because why would you buy an artwork that just may be totally tottering along? You don't want that. You actually want a great big tsunami wave of investment and excitement, and you want to get on that and surf it and it'd be amazing, because the values are going up. Well, actually that does happen. So you just simply buy an artwork, you're going to have your price value rise. So the key is to understanding what trends are going on. So what we are able to do is you can come along and do a one-to-one, and I'll find out what sort of artwork you're interested in. And once I know the area that you're interested in, I'll say what trends are going on in those areas. So it's really, really thought through that actually, okay, this is where I'm passionate about, and this is where the biggest movement is. So you really have that security that what you're buying is in a good place. So
can you give me an example from one of these artists that you've seen recently starting to trend?
Well, to be fair, there's quite a few trends going through at the moment. One of the ones that we see is when an art movement goes from a country situation to a global situation. And so what we do is we work out which art movements are in with what country, and is it getting international? Modern British is a brilliant example. My goodness, has Modern British done well in these last 2 years, and it is purely because...
Sorry, what is Modern British?
Sorry, Modern British is great question. It's basically a period of time for about 1900 to about 1950. It's basically the interwar years is where a particular ripe time was for creativity. The St Ives group came out of that. Before that, of course, was the Bloomsbury group. So both of those have done really, really well in trending, in respect that they are now collected internationally. So I've seen, people like Duncan Grant from the Bloomsbury group. Really, you could have bought him very, very cheaply, and very, very, he was very cheap, to be fair, but now, my goodness, he's into the tens of thousands, if not into the hundreds now. So, and to see that rise of him, for example, or Henry Moore, again, another example, he's a modern British artist and has done extremely well in the auction rooms, and it is because he's now collected internationally. So it is that understanding of getting behind those trends, buying into it, and enjoying knowing that you've bought into a good stream.
So what would trigger something like that? Where to obviously they were just going along as national artists, if you like, and suddenly they become international?
Well, there's all sorts of things, to be fair. There's a whole rich flavour of reasons why something becomes a tipping point. For the Bloomsbury Group, for example, in America, Primetime TV had a TV series on the Bloomsbury Group. So suddenly America woke up to this quintessential elite group that was, at Charleston and, hanging out and coming out with, and people obviously know the literary side with Virginia Woolf and that. So that has become suddenly interesting to Americans, and therefore it's responded again in the values.
Okay, excellent. And if we turn our attention now to more contemporary art, is there a role for the investor in looking at trends there?
Yeah, that's a really important area, and you can go very awry with contemporary. 99% of contemporary art I would not touch. Wow. Because they don't understand the mechanisms for value. They're just the artist pushing his own thing commercially, when really an artist, if they want to succeed in contemporary, need to look at their pedigree. What is building up, what museums, what shows, what papers, what news magazines, all of those things that are writing about them, really building up the quality and how they're contributing to the canon of art. Most artists don't even understand any of that, and that's why they're not doing it. That's why 90% and 99% are not doing it. But the ones that do, you recognize, you go, I can see you're really engaging in the understanding of the canon, and where there's a real rich area for an artist to explore, but not many are doing it, so therefore I only buy the artists that are, and that's the ones who get propelled in the future.
And I think one of the things that you've developed within the club is a kind of another part of the system is looking at which contemporary artists potentially get behind.
No, and obviously I'm fascinated by it. It's a specialism for me actually, and I just love that whole area. Yeah.
Okay. So as we come to the end of our time together, I think it's worth just sort of reiterating how the Mellor Art Club works and what people get. So I think the core of it is these 10 talks that you give?
The 10 talks is that journey, that collector journey. Remember, I wanted to get somebody who's a complete novice to a connoisseur. How do you do that? Is it possible? Yes, it is, because I'm actually doing it with a whole load of people already. And so by being part of the art club, you're able to go through those 10 steps. It's a layering process. They're not chronologically necessarily. So if you miss one, it doesn't really matter. You do it, so it doesn't have that worry. But you basically 10 layers of understanding. And with that, you'll be able to definitely, confidently operate within the art market safely.
And then within that, you also have a one-to-one time with you, and then also I think there's some newsletters and webinars as well.
Yeah, the one-to-ones are really special because I'll tailor it specifically to that person, wherever their knowledge is, and I ask them what their goals are. And sometimes they don't even know what their goals are. They're just fronted a piece of artwork, and I'll say, well, fine, have an eclectic mix, and now and again you purchase, and that's enough. For some people, no, they want to get a particular area covered. They get passionate about a particular area of art history, and they want to do a whole collection from that period, and that's fine too. So whatever the people's want. So the one-to-ones are really special because I'm able to really help them fulfill the goals that they have for themselves about the artwork that they want to buy.
Okay, and I think the talks and the one-to-ones would either happen at your gallery in Oxford or at your magnificent home as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of the events just because my home is very good for events. It's all tailored for that particularly well, and so people can come along. It's a very old house, and there's artworks around, and people hear the talk or do the one-to-ones with me there. And remember, it's all about the fun of it. I'm in it for that. I really, really do love this area. It is so interesting.
I think my own reason for getting involved and wanting to be working so closely with you is I think you do have this relatively unique combination of the passion for the art itself, but also having an investor's head on you that realises that this is an opportunity to
enjoy
make
it
some
and
money.
sensible.
Yeah. So really excited to be working with you on this. Aidan Mellor, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So there you have it. 5 fascinating interviews with Aidan Mellor, and you can see how his passion comes through for the subject, but also how he's got this investor's brain as well as an artistic appreciation. And what's really unique about Aidan is that he has systematized the whole process from how you buy, how you make sure it's authentic, then how you can add value to the piece once you've bought it, and then how you prepare it for sale and all the different platforms you can use and how to use each one effectively. I've not come across anyone else in the art world who's doing this, so I'm really pleased that we've been able to launch the Mellor Art Club. You can click the link below this video for more information, but I think for anyone that's got the slightest interest in the art world, this is hopefully, I think, what you've been waiting for. The A to Z from one source in a system showing you how to enter and profit from the world of art investment. If you've been following my talks on meta-diversification, you'll know that I encourage the ownership of assets in multiple countries and multiple regimes. Unfortunately, HMRC doesn't think quite the same way, and they've just issued final warnings to owners of overseas assets just to make sure that they are declaring them and paying the right amount of tax. This is something called RTC, Requirement to Correct. Only the HMRC could come up with an acronym like that, couldn't they? And RTC is of course linked to CRS. CRS being the common reporting standard being implemented in 100 countries so that you can have all your affairs shown in every country and you can't escape. Now, the thing is that what I find really offensive about this is that they are still defining exactly what they mean by this RTC, and they were issuing new guidance as recently as August the 21st for rules that come into effect on September the 30th. That means that accountants and tax advisors have got no time at all to analyse the latest guidance and then to give the right advice to their clients. So, this to me again is completely unacceptable behaviour by HMRC. How can you have changes and final nuances being defined as recently as late August for something that is introduced in late September? It should have been postponed by at least 6, probably 12 months. But it hasn't been, because all these other dates are tying up with the common reporting standard. They're sticking rigidly to this. So you've got to think very carefully now about any overseas assets and income you may have. For example, the obvious one would be a holiday home that you rent out overseas. Have you declared income from that? But there are less obvious ones. What if you're the executor of a family member's estate and it turns out they owned assets overseas? HMRC could come after you for what they claim to be unpaid tax in those circumstances. So you have to look at if you've got bank accounts paying £3.50 interest or whatever it is in some foreign country, that's all got to be declared as well. So if you don't hit the September 30th deadline and they then find that there's something you missed, they have put the fine up to 200% of the tax that was due. So they're effectively doubling. It was already 100%. They're doubling that to 200% fine with effect from the 1st of October. So if the amounts are significant, obviously, this could become a very large amount of money that you could be fined. Another way you could be hit by this is if you've moved abroad, but you've let out your property in the UK, there could be further tax liabilities on that again would be scooped up in this requirement to correct, and also obviously scooped up in the common reporting standard. So I think for me, obviously, I've never been one to suggest that you try and hide money from the authorities or that there's any kind of value or point in tax evasion. These days, you're never going to get away with it. So don't for one moment think that I'm trying to encourage that. What I get annoyed by is this sort of thing where new measures are introduced with insufficient time for people to plan and prepare. They're still changing the rules almost as the ink is drying. There's no time for people to advise their clients, and yet the penalties get doubled with no delay to the implementation date. So there's only one lesson that you can take from this, and that is that you need to be constantly on top of your tax affairs. You need a tax planning partner. I make no excuse for the fact this is self-serving. Obviously, we run elite tax planning in the UK, and this is what we do. But whoever is your tax planner, whoever you take your tax advice from, this is the sort of thing where you need to be up to date. They need to keep you proactively informed. If you have not been told about these things by your accountant or tax advisor, that should give you a little warning that maybe you are vulnerable because you're not being kept informed proactively. So this is not a once and done process. They change the rules all the time. They're looking for new ways of catching you out all the time. They want you to do things wrong so they can fine you and retrospectively charge you all sorts of other tax. They are ruthless in their pursuit of their goals. You need to be ruthless in your pursuit of proper tax planning and tax structures to minimize the amount you pay for yourself and for your family going forward. Stay within the law, but make sure you're getting good tax advice, because these buggers at HMRC are out to get you. Thanks for watching 1% Weekly. If you like what you see, why not subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell so you get notified every time we broadcast a new program. Or if you just want to watch another video, how about this one?
are you going to make a choice then? Because I can't sort of stay here all day. I'm getting my hands are getting tired. So in your own time,